welcome to this new episode of our podcast Peace Today, where we talk with people from all over the world who are dedicated to building a more peaceful world. And this more peaceful world is an absolute necessity in a time where we hear every day from mass slaughters and killing fields from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and Congo and many places that we don't even hear about. So it's highly necessary that we try to understand what's going on in our world of today and that we try to see through the darkness and learn how we can build a more peaceful world. And today I'm very happy that I can talk to Nina Koevoets. Nina is a trainer in peace building, and she's also the author of a recently published book which is called The Peace Compass. And today I would like to ask her some questions about her book and about her experiences in peace building. Welcome, Nina.
Yeah, thank you.
My first question to you is, what brought you on the path towards working with peace building?
Yes, so I remember that when I was about 13 or 14, we had a visit to my school from War Child, and it really moved me a lot. So I was very shocked that there are children my age or even younger that have to kill other human beings and can only do that through taking a lot of drugs. And later on I decided to study psychology, but then I became very unsure if I wanted to become a psychologist and so I was searching for what else I could do, and I found a master in conflict resolution. And I thought, well, that's a way to combine my interest for politics, for which there is no space in psychology, but also do something with what I've already learned in my bachelor in psychology. And yeah, then I really found that something that really interested me. So I did a course also on the conflict in Israel-Palestine and an internship about that and wrote my thesis. And then I ended up there a year later. And that's made a big impact on me. So that really put me on the path of becoming a peace builder.
Yes. Like my first, and maybe that sounds like a big question, but I think it's quite important to ask this question to you also, is what, it looks very basic, but what do we understand when we talk about peace? Because if you listen to television or the news or read the newspaper, then you can think that peace can also be brought about by war or by weapons. Yeah. Many people nowadays are talking, we need to have peace in Ukraine, for instance, just to name an example, and therefore we need to arm ourselves because that will deter our enemy from attacking us, something like that. And I think that's there are people with maybe different opinions about that. But what is peace for you? Can you tell a little bit about that?
So to start, maybe I'm a pacifist. So that means that I don't believe that violence can ever lead to peace. I think I really believe in what Gandhi was saying, that we need peaceful means to have a peaceful outcome. So he said the means are the end in the making, not the means justify the goal or the end. And I think another problem with peace for me, which is what I write also in the Peace Compass, that a lot of people think about peace as what Johan Galtung used to call negative peace. Yes. And that's the absence of armed conflict. And if we just think like, for example, then in the Netherlands we have peace. But if we think of positive peace, so those are the attitudes, the beliefs and the structures in society that promote peace, then our view really broadens and we can come to the realization that also in the Netherlands we can do many things on peace building and to create a more peaceful society. So
you say negative peace is just the absence of overt violence, let's say, and you say and positive. I try to write it down. It has to do with attitudes.
beliefs and structures, if I say it right by heart.
Yeah, exactly. So you say when a society doesn't necessarily have visible violence, but is still sort of has violent beliefs or has a mentality of creating conflict, then still you cannot really talk about a peaceful society.
Yes, correct. So if you start looking at our culture, for example, in the West, I generalize now.
Yes, I always do that also myself. So.
Yeah, so then we live in quite a violent culture because a lot of people justify violence or see it as something effective. So I don't believe it should be justified, and I also don't believe it's effective. On the long term.
On the long term. I understand. But can I ask you then maybe a difficult question? And I also, I'm thinking about it a lot, you know? For instance, I give the example, I don't ask you to give any comments about the war in Ukraine or something, but there are currently a lot of people who say, as I said before, you know, we have to fight there because there was an injustice committed by Russia, for instance. But you can take other examples also of invasions, and then wouldn't it be more just to sort of help the Ukrainians fight until they get their justice, because there was an injustice committed to them, they were attacked, they were invaded, people were being killed, their land was being taken. This is injustice. And if we deal with it in a pacifist manner, you basically say, okay, well, we're not gonna defend ourselves. We just gonna let this injustice happen. And how do we deal with such kind of questions? Because also me myself, I get this reproach quite a lot when I say something that we shouldn't approach the war. We shouldn't think of the Ukraine war, for instance, in a militaristic manner, but we should open the ways for dialogue, etc. The first reproach is you get, okay, well, that way you give the aggressor everything they want.
So I think it's first of all a matter of strategy, and Gene Sharp is a person who made a big research about non-violent methods to create social change, and unfortunately that is not something most people know. So you cannot expect other people to have a different opinion if they are not informed. And you can also see that a lot of those non-violent movements have been quite successful. So then later on, but actually quite late relatively, in 2011, there has been a big research made by two women, Erica Chenoweth and Maria Steven, who were comparing about 50 non-violent movements with 50 violent movements, and looked at so who is more effective in achieving their goals, so the goals that they declared. And they looked only at 4 types of conflict. So they were mostly about regime change, a territorial conflict, and I think also occupation. So the occupation were just a few cases, and those cases were not successful. So that means they are very, very hard. But in case of regime change, they were almost 3 times, like 2.5, I don't know the exact number, but more effective than the violent movements. And very surprisingly, they were also much quicker. So it took about 7 years for the violent groups to achieve their goals, and only 16 months for the non-violent groups. But most people don't know that, and that's why they don't believe it works.
And here you mean, because regime change, you can have positive and negative, no? I mean,
sure.
You can have dictatorships that are being removed. This would be positive, I guess. But if democracies are being regime changed, let's say, that's maybe not a positive thing.
Yeah, they also looked at that. So the more democratic the movement was from its start, the more democratic the result. So that's again the principle of the means are the end in the making. Yeah. Like in Egypt, for example, it was a successful movement because they achieved their goals. The most important goal was just to get Mubarak out. but then they didn't have so much of a picture of what will happen afterwards.
Sure.
So if they have a more clear picture of that, then also the result is going to be, well, not better, but more democratic and more sustainable.
Yeah.
So it is really about, it is not simplistic. And I do understand people's concern because no one likes to see injustice. But the problem with violence is that you create a cycle, and you see it on a small level as well between parents and their children, or if you have a bully in the classroom, no? Then if you're just gonna try to bully back the bully, you're really not solving the problem. And most people do get that when you just talk about the classroom, but then they don't see that there is just the same logic in the international conflicts. But I think those are the same principles.
So that should be the answer to people who claim that we can only, there are so many statements like the enemy XYZ only listens to violence, so we have to, use violence.
Yeah, but that's maybe underestimating people, because have they ever been approached in a non-violent way? Because you can say, I don't agree with your strategy. So there are two hands of non-violence, and that's like, I don't agree with your actions. And I reach out my hand to you to have a dialogue, to change your strategy, because I see your humanity. And you and I are both humans, and in that we can connect to each other. So it's like a basic respect for life.
I agree very much with this point of view. However, I also personally have difficulties with sort of explaining that or understanding that in a context where the power difference is so extreme. You've been to Palestine yourself. In that case, I find it also very. I'm still always against using violence, so let that be clear. But for a Palestinian to say, or from a Palestinian now from Gaza to say, I don't agree with your approach and let's talk about it, you know that nobody's going to listen to that person. They will just be bombed. So how can we explain it in that context? How can we understand it in a context where there's such an extreme disbalance of power?
Yeah, so this is not only about talking. It can also be the moment that the level of violence is very high. Your non-violent response should be very high. So if you look at the movement of Martin Luther King, they were organizing so many actions all the time, and they had many trainings. So they really trained their activists to stay disciplined and not use any violence. And I think that that is a very good point, because we are training people in the military to kill other people, but we don't train people to build peace. So you cannot compare that with each other. How can we have we only have a faint taste in a way of what nonviolence can actually do. Its real potential is not yet used, let's say, because there are a few organizations who train people to become peace builders, to become like non-violent conflict mediators or navigators, I call it. So there is something happening, and I think that should happen much more, instead of training people to kill each other, because that's not what I would like to see in the world.
Well, it's amazing, and I've said it at other times also, amazing at the amount of money that we spend on arms and fighting and killing and bombing and developing all sorts of innovative technologies to kill and murder, and there's zero budget for any other approach than that. But also the bare knowledge of, that also peace is some sort of science or some sort of knowledge that you can understand and that it works, etc. It seems absent from the entire political scene or debate, no?
Yes, I think those discussions take more place in academia still, and are not enough part of the discussions in the media or in politics. And especially now that we see a right-wing movement, let's say, politically.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book. I think you referred already to some things that you've written. Why did you want to write the book, and what do you want to teach? Can you maybe, if it's not too much for you, explain the outline and the goal of your book?
Yeah, of course, I'd like to. So so I've been a trainer in peace building for about 10 years, and then I wrote a workshop manual together with another trainer from Canada who was very experienced, and she was 70-something. So I learned a lot from her, and also in the writing process, and that was published in 2019. But it was also a book that had a big background from her organization in the US. And so I started to feel the need for like finding a little bit more my own philosophy or tone in it, let's say. Yeah. And I wanted to write something, and I had the idea to first do several interviews with people, but I also had become a mother, and it seemed like a very big project to me, and I didn't do anything. But then the violence in Gaza was escalating quite quickly, and so the moment that South Africa went to hear the International Court of Justice to say, well, you know, maybe a genocide is happening there, I had a conversation with a friend, and this friend was asking me a few times, but what is the solution? And I was like, you know, I don't think that I can give you a clear-cut answer, because I thought about that conflict for so long, and I tried to also distance myself from it in a way to just for my mental health. Yes. But I do think I have a vision, and then I just, after that conversation, I opened my computer and I was like, I really need to write what is my vision, and let people understand some important points. So I first actually had a line out of the book with peace with yourself, peace with each other, and peace in the society. And then I had a very early reader who said, what about peace with the earth? And I was like, yes, of course. I have also given that some attention in my training courses, because many of us are concerned about climate change and destruction of nature as well. And so then I had 4 parts of the book, and then just at some point that I was writing, I said, hey, that's 4 directions. And so I had this idea of a compass, and those are the 4 directions of the peace compass.
Yes. And so these are directions.
Yeah.
What in it would you say is sort of essential part of your vision? What is new? What is different? What do you think should be heard and isn't heard enough?
A couple of things. Well, most of it I haven't invented myself, so I'm just putting different things together in that. And I think that's also in a way the strength of the book, because I really like the image of the compass. It gives people a direction, and it gives guidelines, and then also in the book I have practices. So I give people ways to practice the things that are in there. And that's maybe new, because I didn't want to write like a separate workbook, for example. But also I find it very important that we take a holistic approach. Yes. So we can try to do something in all those 4 directions, and maybe we have a focus, like my own focus is more in peace education. Yes. And and interpersonal peace, I would say, because in that I find it very practical, and I can explain to people how they can resolve their conflicts with their friends and their family, let's say. And I don't need to go into like difficult political analysis. Yeah. So everyone can find what attracts them the most, and still try to see how everything is connected and how it's important, because peace inside myself is quite an important starting point, in my opinion, to do any peace work.
And what does it mean, peace in yourself?
So it means that I can be resilient in challenging situations, and I pay attention to my mental health. I maybe have some daily or regular practices. For example, I meditate, and it can be quite simple. I try to do it like half an hour, and it was just too much, so I stopped. But then if it just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then maybe I sometimes sit even for 20 because I'm in a good flow with it. So those things are important because I can just really sense the peace inside of me, and maybe when it's a little bit more busy in my head, it can calm down, or I can gain some clarity for myself.
Hey, and can you give some examples of, for instance, how this book could help people solve certain conflicts? Do you have an example of a certain type of conflict that you could say, okay, that I can step in there somehow with a book or as a trainer?
Yeah.
You think, okay, we can deal with this.
Yeah, so many, I would say.
Maybe some of your real practice.
Sure. So I do a lot of role plays, and a funny thing was that we found out a lot of people have a conflict about the dishes.
Okay.
And there's always one person in the house who doesn't do the dishes, and they leave them in the sink. So I really love the tool of nonviolent communication. And the main idea is that our conflicts are on a level of strategy, and when we communicate judgments or evaluations, interpretations. But below that is actually our feelings, and our feelings are an information of our needs. So I probably feel very agitated, let's say, with the other person who leaves all those dishes in the sink, because I need cleanliness, or I just need ease to make my food in the kitchen. So if I'm gonna approach the other person and I say, "You are so messy, why do you always leave the dishes in the sink?" It's probably gonna get me a response like, "Oh, I don't do that always," or something defensive. But if I just keep it, if I use I messages, it's called, so I keep it for myself, let's say, I don't point a finger to the other person, but I identify my feelings. So I say I'm annoyed because I would just really like more cleanliness because of hygienical reasons, or I say, I see all those dishes there in the kitchen, and in this way I can't prepare my own food now. It's not practical. Then that person can understand me, and the person can say that, okay, so I understand this, and they can also tell me why do they do that. And maybe they are just very stressed and always in a hurry, or they don't just really see how it impacts the other person. And when that becomes clear to them, often people want to contribute to the other person's well-being. And then there is a willingness to cooperate and find a solution.
That sounds great and a good relation advice, I would say. If we try to lift it a bit higher, let's say, or higher, deeper, whatever you want, and say it's about more social issues. For instance, maybe I give the example. If it's not a right example, then you change it. That's also fine. But for me, you assume sort of rationality. If I explain this to my partner, then he or she will, or they will understand. But for instance, now there's a lot of it seems that there is no real debate, but there is people talking, shouting things. For instance, about Israel-Palestine. I don't mean the context itself, but people here in the Netherlands who have an opinion. So where the one group is very emotional and is saying, this has to stop. This is terrible. We have never seen such a slaughter in our lives, and we are complicit. And how can we even not see that? That's one side of the story. And then, for instance, people on the government side who say, yeah, we don't agree and we doubt whether it's genocide, and who keep talking with the Israelis, etc. Or even worse, those people who actively defend it and use all sorts of non-arguments in my vision, because I'm quite partisan in that issue, but say, the self-defense or whatever. how can we bring such? This is not a real dialogue. It's more like a statements. And how can we? Is it realistic to use kind of this type of this method that you've written for these kind of discussions?
So first of all, what you say is true, that there's not really a dialogue. And I have been part of a group of Israelis and Palestinians that are having a dialogue with each other. And
still at this moment?
Yeah, somehow a little bit still, but I'm not sure how active they are. I do know that at least the few Palestinians that I'm still in contact with appreciate my work. But so they also got to know a little bit about nonviolent communication. So at least they see the value in that, and that's important to say, I think. But I, as an outsider, was sometimes even more skeptical than they themselves, because I just thought, okay, it's great. Yes, I do understand that in the end you need to live there together, so you do need to talk, but you need something more. And to me, that is nonviolent activism. So you can't resolve something only on the level of talking.
No.
Yeah, that is what you already said about power imbalance.
Yes, power imbalance, yeah.
And when there is a power imbalance, it is a lot harder to just try to resolve only by talking your issues. So you need to find other ways of gaining power. And I have here a nice picture of that. So this is nonviolent power. I don't know.
Look at the camera. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the Dutch version, but it is the nonviolent power exists of 3 sources of power. So you have the power to act and the power to wit, so in your group, and you have the power within. So power within is the calm that you can have, the resilience that you have to continue to make an effort for peace, even if it's really, really hard. Yeah. And the power with is really like, that you create in the group. It's kind of like the sum of the parts are more than each individual. Yeah. And the power two are certain skills that we need to learn. So how can we organize? How can we bring our message effectively? How do we do team building and all those things that are important to make a movement effective? How do we make sure it's diverse? Because that also has been a factor that turned out to be important to make a successful nonviolent movement.
Yes, so to the question how to deal with a dialogue where there's a big power imbalance, you basically say you need to build your own power.
Yeah, you need to develop nonviolent power. Yeah. That's nonviolent power. So the power imbalance is a power over. One person has a power over the others. But in a sense that power is also given. We give away a lot of power by not doing anything. So pacifism definitely is not about being passive. It's actually something very active. Yes. We need to actively take a stance and say, I don't cooperate with this injustice. So when there's an injustice done and we say, oh, we need now weapons to end that injustice, we can say, if we don't agree to that, well, what about just strategically approaching this and build a nonviolent power that says, I don't cooperate with your injustice, because...
Yeah. I get your point, and
we both suffer from it also in the end. Yes, the oppressor. There is something called a moral injury, and it's also a very new concept. I briefly only mention it in my book, but it's very interesting because people who commit violence, so who are being sent in armies, often in other countries to kill other people, often come home traumatized.
Yes, from both sides.
Yeah, from all sides, yes, because their morality is hurt in a sense. So the perpetrator is not, there are no winners, I think. In the end, you can maybe say that from an outside perspective or from the person on the top who lets all the other people kill other people for him, mostly not her.
Mostly, yeah.
So only from a very, very narrow-minded perspective there can be maybe a winner and a loser. But if you just look at it from a broader point of view, then there are only losers.
Yes. I think you touch upon very important things that are part of the discussion, but not in this explicit way. And I feel that many of us also who are dealing with peace activism, whatever, also have difficulties explaining those kind of things. I mentioned the example where an organization like Amnesty or Pax, they say, there's an injustice, so we need first the injustice to be corrected, and then we can talk about peace and those kind of things. Yeah. Do you understand? So, it's hard to deal with that because they, and also our government is doing that. They play on the moral card first, not very in a disbalanced way, because for Gaza they don't talk about morals, but for Ukraine they talk about morals because there's a democratic country attacked by a authoritarian state. So there's an injustice, we have to correct that, and we have to do that you already replied, we have to do that in a non-violent way.
Yeah, but there's a lot of hypocrisy, if I can say something about it.
Yeah, sure.
So I see a lot of hypocrisy there because in the case of Ukraine, all the refugees were welcome and, they are somehow European. But in the case of Gaza, they are mostly Muslims and they are not white. So there is just not the same moral standard applied everywhere. And that's not right, in my opinion.
Yeah. But then that's about this discussion. There's another point of view. So I'm talking about that you're touching upon things that are important for also peace activists and how to deal with sort of counter arguments and those kind of things. And there's also the other argument that you said, for instance, within the Palestine movement, the pro-Palestine movement or the anti-genocide movement, however you want to call it, there are those who say, they take a similar position. This is an absolute injustice. We have to stand up. And you would say, you already replied, you said, we have to build this non-violent power in order to change this injustice. But then there's other people who say, but you are being too intimidating. You are excluding other voices that maybe can be your partners in this discussion. And now you are sort of alienating them because of your sort of resistance position. And we have to have more dialogue. We should talk to each other. And you have these initiatives of different municipalities trying to bring Jews and Muslims together, and which is also good, I would say. But others would then judge it and say, no, there's no time for dialogue. We need to sort of take a stance and reject this, whatever is happening. And every sort of dialogue is a form of betrayal, because. And it's also guiding us away from. This is not a real topic. It's not about Muslims and Jews. It's about injustice being done there. Mm-hmm. So I tend to also, there's a point in both sides, let's say, mm-hmm. and I wonder what your perspective on that discussion would be.
There are a lot of ways to build peace. Mm-hmm. So one doesn't need to exclude the other. I think every effort made is a good one, let's say. Mm-hmm. And also we don't need to invent the wheel. Mm-hmm. So we can just really learn from even like the first people, let's say, the movement of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. Because, they had really good ideas that are still useful. Mm-hmm. And so I would just say, get more educated. Mm-hmm. Inform yourself and don't make a war with people or between brackets, but don't create more arguments than necessary and more conflict with people that in a way are already on your side. Mm-hmm. So it's already very good if anyone agrees that there should be peace. And then of course, in the case of Israel-Palestine, for example, I have talked to a settler that was part of an organization which was called Settlers for Peace. Mm-hmm. And this was a little bit problematic for me because
of course, obviously.
His idea was that, okay, let us Jewish people just settle the whole place and then the Palestinians should just accept it and be friends with us.
Yeah, that's quite
so
problematic.
let's all be friends and we are going to continue to colonize your country. And I was like, okay, that's not the kind of peace I would like. So, of course, there can be different visions for peace. So some kind of basics are needed to agree upon. Let's say, let's end the occupation. But then it's good to choose your battles. So we don't need to create too many arguments like, oh, we have to do only dialogue or only peace activism, or we need to do this kind of action because those are not effective. It's a little bit like Gandhi was calling it experiments. So we need to see what works because not everything that has been done somewhere else is gonna work the same in another place.
Can I put another casus? I don't know how you call it in English. Case. For instance, now also what's also the case is with regards to the whole militarization of society and the build-up of war. It seems to me, at least, that we are going through in Europe. In relation to Ukraine and the build-up, all the war rhetoric with Russia, etc. The case is now also in the Netherlands and across Europe. I think that there are voices from the left and voices from the right, left. It's different than before anyway. But what roughly called left or right, that are both calling out this policy. So are against militarization, are against sort of warmongering, are against the whole reform of our society into a militarist military economy, etc. And it seems that also there it's quite a challenge sometimes to bring those groups together because they do find each other on the same core where it matters, but they differ on quite some other issues, whether it's about LGBT rights or climate change or migration or other points of view. And it is quite hard, I see, sometimes to bring those groups together who in essence have the same in mind, at least on this topic. Do you recognize that, and would you have an advice for those people who struggle with that? So they don't trust each other, let's say. Okay. They think from each other that they say right, but they're actually having the wrong position because they believe in climate or not climate or LGBT or not LGBT, woke, whatever. Okay. You see, so there's mistrust within all those people who are in fact going for the same goal at this point.
Yeah, I guess then only cooperate for the common goal, and if you differ in other things, you don't cooperate. Yeah. So you don't need to create another organization that unifies all those separate organizations. You can say, okay, well, in this matter we agree and not in that.
But you wouldn't go for a all-out peace negotiations between the two groups, let's say.
I think it's important to create at least trust between the groups. Yeah, because if you want to work together, you need to have a basic trust between each other, so you can just collaborate at least on that issue. Yeah. But I don't live in the Netherlands, so I don't know the exact
The thing is,
scene
I think
here.
across Europe it's the same. Like in Germany, you can look at AfD and what do you have, the Wagenknecht, etc., who are sort of right-wing, and Wagenknecht is on some points very right, other points very left. And you have Die Linke. So, and some of them, the message about peace is overlapping, but on other cases they're so far apart that they could never work together.
Yeah, you see? Yeah, then that's okay, I guess. Well, we live in not only in a democracy, but the world is so diverse. Yeah. So that makes peace building skills a necessity. We are going to disagree with each other. We all have such different backgrounds, had such different life experiences around the world now. So we need to really learn to listen to each other, to understand each other better, and to just respect those differences. We don't need to try and get everyone agree with us. No. In my opinion. Yeah. And also I was thinking of a story here in the book. is negotiating with a Muslim extremist. And yeah, so it's a story from a Italian diplomat, Pico. And in 1991, he was sent by the UN to Lebanon. And there were a couple of hostages, I think 11 or so, that were taken. I don't remember if it was only the US or different countries. But so he was taken in the middle of the night, blindfolded, and brought to this Muslim extremist to negotiate with them. And then his first question was, you probably know a lot about me, but I don't know anything about you. And this person replied to him, so what do you want to know about me? And he said, do you have children? And he said, yes. And he said, well, me too. And so I do this work because I want a better world for my children. And then this Muslim extremist replied that I also do this because I want a better world for my children. And because of that connection, they were able to have a successful negotiation and free the hostages. So they were completely different on most other things. But this one shared identity and a wish for the future generation moved things forward.
I believe very much in that, and I think that's lost very easily or too quickly when people, for instance, talk about Gaza, and that they don't realize what they say about other people also counts for them. And I find it very disturbing that people seem to lose a lot of this. This is basically empathy, no? So that you can see yourself in the other, in the same sort of life experience, suffering, whatever. And this empathy is under pressure, I would say. And it's interesting that there is actually a biological underpinning of it as well. So because I researched it a little bit for the book, it says one of the chapters it starts with empathy and understanding. And it turns out that when children experience violence, their receptors to be empathic are dying off. So for them it's then much harder to be empathic persons as they grow up. But the good news is that you can learn empathy. So if somehow in their life they have an opportunity to again learn to be empathic, the brain can adapt. And do you teach that also in your courses?
I don't know if I always mention it, but definitely I do teach empathy because that's an important part of conflict resolution.
So if there's one thing that you would people to sort of learn from your book, maybe it's too little, just one thing, but what would you choose that would stick with people?
So I hope the concept of positive peace will stick with people, so it broadens their imagination, and then I hope that they will feel inspired by the many examples in the book, like this negotiation I told you.
Yes.
I put also a few examples from Israel-Palestine. There is, for example, a family, the Tent of Nations. I don't know if you heard about them. Yeah, so I found them very inspiring because they really take a stand while they are really surrounded by settlements, and have invited people from abroad to stand with them in solidarity. And there's also an Israeli organization who rebuilds houses. So that's another good example from that area. And so there are many examples in the book, and I hope that this gives people a feeling that peace is really possible, because some people are already doing it, and I can play a part in it. That's what I hope people leave with, that they think, okay, I can do something as well. And I've actually heard 2 days ago, I did a workshop, and there were 3 people who started a peace group because they read my book.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I hope that this is gonna happen.
Yeah, maybe as a last thing, I think there's people who are, and maybe you've talked about it already, but there are people who are just desperate, I would say, and many people have become active and angry and, I don't know, sad because of what's happening. Some are going into the streets, but also many have decided, I also see it around me, so to say, this is just too bad. I can't live with it. So I rather sort of turn out the news than sort of be confronted with this violence every day. So people have actually given up a little bit, many people who could maybe contribute in a positive way, but they've given up because they don't believe that things can change. And what would you say to them?
So I think that's very valid. Personally, I do try to speak out against what's happening in the occupied territories of the West Bank and Gaza. And as an outsider, I think that my role is little. So I also acknowledge that, and my power in that conflict is little, but it is something. So I do continue to share my beliefs. And at the same time, my focus is not there anymore. My focus was there when I was physically there, but now my focus is in, well, my immediate surrounding. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, so I try to raise her peacefully. And yeah, just the people around me, but also the training courses that I do, there are participants from Europe. And it's a little bit easier to connect also to their context, because it's more similar. And I feel that it's very helpful, the tools that I can offer. And everyone will have something different that they can offer to others. So however big or small, just find your personal way to contribute, and please don't be desperate or feel sad. I mean, we all have to go through sadness, because it is very, very sad what is happening in the world. And then we need to act from that sadness. So we need to somehow feel compassion. Actually, I think I don't know if it was the Dalai Lama or not, or another Buddhist person that said, empathy is when we just feel the other person. We can understand their feelings, and then we kind of move on, to the next feeling we have or we see another person having. But compassion is acting on that feeling. So I think that everyone is capable to act with compassion.
All right, thank you very much for these nice words and words of hope, despite the trouble that we're in as a people and as a planet.
Can I say also something that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so because I wanted to mention two more things actually. The children's book I wrote is a story of 4 birds, and they have different conflict styles. Because I thought, so how can what is the most essential to teach to children to learn how to deal with conflicts? Because if Netanyahu and Putin and Trump and all those leaders would have learned this in their childhood, maybe we wouldn't be where we are now today. And so the first step for me is to become more conscious, first of all, of how we are acting in conflict. Do we compete? Do we avoid it? Do we accommodate other people? Or maybe we just try to always compromise and then we give and take. But there's another style which is problem solving. And that is something that needs to be developed much more, hopefully from an early age. That's why I wrote the book. And then I also developed a game with for adults, because I need a different approach. So that's called Peace, Please.
Please, yeah, very good.
And it's a cooperative game, so you have a challenge in the middle, and okay, let's pick one, for example, about climate change. So the government has announced that they are going to invest in gas instead of dealing with climate change, and this is an issue that your organization works on. No? There are different environmental organization. And then I have different options. So I can, here I can, for example, try to convince other people to make a riot. And it is a card that is harmful for a culture of peace, because the whole game is built on a culture of peace. Or I can cheer and I say, only good vibes. No, so that is here, that's a square, and that is not so impactful. Doesn't really make an impact. Okay, so what else do we have here? Okay, so I meet with the mayor and I plea for the issue that my organization is working on. So there can be an approach that at least on a local level I try to achieve something, or maybe I'm gonna have a workshop or a movie night, or I share resources about nonviolent action. And so through the game you have different discussions and you talk about the impact of different types of actions.
And how to win this game?
Yeah, so you can win it by overcoming three different challenges with different colors. And on each challenge there is a number. So here, for example, this 8. And as a group you need to agree on which 2 cards you choose. So let's say a minimum of 3 players you have, and each one proposes something. Then you choose 2 and you see the numbers. So this is 6 and that's 5. So yeah, I have overcome this challenge, but you can get stuck as well. No? And then you lose the game if you get stuck with 3 challenges. Also.
Okay. That's super interesting, and thanks for sharing your passion about peace education. I think it's very, very important, and I think there's something called Peaceful Schools in the Netherlands. It's also a nice initiative. It's helping children, older children, resolving conflicts between younger children. It's a very nice system. But a lot more education should be done.
And also for adults, actually, because
absolutely.
We don't know.
The first place for adults at this moment, because I think they don't always take the most responsible positions at the moment. So thank you very much for sharing this with us. And we will share your details of your websites under the video so people can look you up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Nina.
you.